Thank you.
Beautiful. Okay, why don't we call the meeting to order and then I can start asking questions. So okay, we're called to order at 4:05. And I see we have one guest, Kyrie McLennan. Is that correct, Chief?
That's
Hey
correct.
there. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to get to you very shortly, but let's just take a roll call here. Can I get everyone to respond? Larry, you're there from Mexico.
I am indeed.
Fantastic. Tom, you're there.
I'm here.
Okay, Nadine, you're there.
Here.
And Ken, you're there.
I'm here pretending to be you. Yes.
Dave, you're there.
Present.
Stan, you're there.
Yeah.
Chief White, you're there. And we have a guest, Kyrie McLennan, so we have a full house. Fantastic. So let me start. Usually we let our anyone coming from the community speak first. Kyrie, could you introduce yourself? If you can unmute and say hello.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Hi.
Very good.
I am a resident of San Rafael and live out near Station 5. And my son Mason is the department's #1 fan. He's 16 and a half years old, and we spend a lot of time driving around all the various stations and getting to know folks and watching the activity. He's a special needs kiddo, and your department has been so wonderful towards him from the chief on down. And I'm involved in other ways in the community with the San Rafael City Schools Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. I'm very involved in both of my son's schools. And so I wanted to stop in and catch a little bit of the meeting. I can't stay too long today, but I'll come to another one. I'm interested in serving if you have any need for citizen volunteers on any of your committees. I'd like to be considered.
Wow, that's fantastic. What a great offer. And I'm going to take you up on that. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Would any of the commissioners like to make any comments or say hello?
Welcome.
Hi, welcome.
Hi, Kyrie.
Hi.
Thank you.
Nice to
Welcome
meet you.
indeed.
Thank you so much. We'd love to have community participation, and I will say it's not very common, but it's wonderful. Kyrie, did I pronounce it right, Kyrie?
It's Kiri. That's okay. That doesn't matter.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for joining us and welcome.
Thank you.
Beautiful. So we'll get started with the meeting. First of all, Stan, your minutes last time were incredible. They were so literary and fantastic. I want to thank you for putting the time and effort into making them not only very detailed and very enjoyable to read, but fun to read and
Sure.
interesting and educational.
Right.
Super job.
Thank you.
Anybody like to make any additions or corrections to Stan's minutes?
No, but I'll move to approve.
Second.
Okay, so moved. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Dave. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, all's well that ends well. Thank you so much, Stan. You set the bar for future minutes taking, and I will take them today, so thank you very much. I want to talk about the Fire Foundation because you were all disappointed and I was disappointed we couldn't have a crab feed this year. We had to make that decision in early September when we didn't know how COVID was going to play out over the next few months. And as it turns out, I think it would have been very problematic to have the crab feed this coming Saturday night. So even in retrospect, I think we made the right decision to cancel the crab feed. We do have a fund letter that has gone out the first part of December, and that is an online fundraiser. And basically what it talks about is why we couldn't do the crab feed because of COVID and such. And that what the Fire Foundation does is really support the firefighters in ways above and beyond what the department itself can do, purchasing certain items, equipment, things going above and beyond the basics. And one of the examples was the fireboat, which the Fire Foundation purchased. Actually, the first fireboat was a small, more like a Zodiac type thing. And then we upgraded to a larger fireboat back in 2019, and you're all familiar with the fireboat. And that was one of the things the Fire Foundation did, which was very, very substantial. And we continue to do small things. We noted in the outreach letter, and I hope you all got a copy of that by email. It wasn't sent hard copy, it was sent by email. And Len Thompson sent that out because Jack has had some medical issues, but it was under Jack's name. And we do have some other things we want to do. One of the things we did recently for the AmeriCorps was provide Thanksgiving dinner for them. And so I think you saw in the newsletter, the Hot Shots News, I took over from Andy's out in Loch Lomond, a very nice dinner with turkey and stuffing and fixings and vegetables and a pie and all this. And we provided the AmeriCorps with Thanksgiving dinner. They're given a $5 a day food allowance, so it's not very much. And I appreciated having the Thanksgiving meal, so we did that. And in the outreach note, we said that if anyone donates $100, they'd be able to get the new challenge coin. Now, you don't have to donate, but I'm giving each of the fire commissioners a challenge coin. So I saw Tom and Nadine last night at the commissioners' soiree at City Hall, and I sent Stan yours this morning. Dave, I sent yours this morning. Larry's, I sent yours to your Sausalito address. And Ken, I have to get the exact address you want me to send it to, but everybody on the commission will get one, and the chief has a coin. So that's the new fire coin,
They're
which
beautiful. Thank you.
it's a totally
Thank
new
you.
style, and it commemorates the Fire Foundation. The book that's shown in the sculptural rendition on one side is based on a picture I took the day the boat was launched, when all the firefighters and Chief Gray and everyone. So that's what it's based on. So that's an update on that. Presently, the Fire Foundation has about $72,000 total, and we're continuing to work with the chief, and he joins us to talk about access that money in a way that goes above and beyond what the department can do. So we'll continue to be that fundraising arm and provide little things between the cracks for the firefighters and paramedics. This Saturday, actually, at the graduation ceremony at the rec center, we're going to recognize Bob DeLambert for the work he's done with the Fire Foundation. During all the crabs feed, Bob and his family and people he's asked to help have given us tremendous support for the crab feed. And in fact, I'm not really sure we could have done it without Bob and his family and everyone really doing a lot of the legwork and getting donations of wine and other auction items for the crab feed. So we're going to recognize Bob this coming Saturday, if everybody can come to that, along with the new graduating class. Okay, so that's my summary for the Fire Foundation. I have nothing new on the historic subcommittee. The chief may want to talk about one little donation he's gotten, but we continue to try to think through how to provide display cases that are both inviting, interesting, and secure in the Public Safety Center. So things we could do in the lobby would be different from things we could do on the fire side of the Public Safety Center. And we need to think through what's the best way of displaying things and showing things in a way that's both safe and effective. So maybe Larry, you and I can get together with Jeff Kramer and a few others and talk about how to approach that in a constructive way. But there's nothing new to report on that subcommittee. So I will go to Fire Commissioner's report. Larry, do you want to tell us how the weather is in Mexico?
Oh, in the mountains of Chiapas here, it's been nice in the day and pretty cold at night. So fortunately, we have a fireplace and plenty of firewood. Nothing to report on the fire scene in spite of all the fireworks and blasts going off. That will culminate this Sunday night in a fireworks spectacular. They run a line of gunpowder from one side of the town to the other, and at about 8 o'clock, ignite it. It's quite a show. Other than that, I don't have anything to report.
Thanks for going above and beyond the call of duty to join us from Mexico. That's probably the farthest we've had someone join us. Good work. Tom, is there anything you'd like to add?
Nothing I can really think of other than a question for the chief, maybe, or maybe for Ken. I was having dinner last month and I was talking with some fellow attorneys up from Santa Rosa, and they were telling me about historic fire planes that apparently were mapped in Sonoma County 100 years ago or 80 years ago. And certain fires would come through certain areas based on the topography, and kind of clear it out, and then the new vegetation would come in. And there was either maps or studies of this. Well, apparently a lot of the new housing up there was built in these fire planes. So in the recent fires in the last few years, the fire would come through like it always has, but this time there were a bunch of houses in the way, and it wiped them all out. So it got me to thinking, do we have that? Are there such maps here in Marin County, and San Rafael in particular, areas that have had fire burns in the past and sort of have a predilection towards fire burns? And if so, have we built houses in those areas? And I don't know if you know that, Chief, or maybe you can as an insurance. I was just curious. I thought it was because I had heard of floodplains and insurance for floods and all that, but I had never heard of these fire planes and areas prone to fire and how that all works. So it was interesting. So if you guys have any insight, I'm all ears.
I can speak briefly. I don't have any insight specifically on San Rafael or Marin County in general. I would believe, much like in Sonoma County, that work like that has already been done here going back decades. The unfortunate reality is that has happened in more communities than we can imagine throughout the state and throughout the whole western portion of the United States. The demand for housing in most cases overrode the need for fire safety. And so people build in saddles and, at the top end of chutes and other locations that are clearly a risk if there's a fire to break out. And so given that, I think the last 2 or 3 decades, especially after the fire we had in the Oakland Hills, started to really illustrate the problem and help people understand what types of home construction, the use of wood shake shingle and other things that were contributing to rapid fire spread or putting their homes in danger. And so with that, there's been mitigation for those property owners, but there still continues to be development in these areas that are known historically to have the geography or topography that is problematic. So it's certainly worth seeing whether or not, or looking into whether or not there are areas that are still unbuilt. But I just question whether or not the risk versus gain is going to be a consideration on preventing people from building in those locations.
Good point.
Yeah, historically, there have been a couple of serious firestorms separated by close to 50 years, but they're really on the southern end of the peninsula that would affect Sausalito and Mill Valley. And the conditions for the last one were, as I understand it, very close to the Oakland Hills fire, with front winds coming from the top of the mountain, going down and pushing fire down rather than the normal path of it going up. But I'm not aware of anything in San Rafael.
Okay.
Actually, it would be an uphill battle to find, because in my area of San Rafael, up until the late 40s, it was a cattle ranch. And there were no trees here. There were stands of redwoods here and there. It was developed in the late 40s, early 50s. And so now we have going on 70 to 80 years of growth because the animals aren't around to knock them over. And so you could have a fire plane map going way back that wouldn't even talk about where I am. And I'm in Wooey.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So it's ever changing, unfortunately, and hard to keep up with.
Well, the other unfortunate consequence of the fires I was referring to is that most of the timber growth that burned was redwood, and what replaced it, unfortunately, has been non-native species and a lot of trees and what have you that are much less fire resistant than redwood.
Stand
Interesting.
minutes in that those who refuse to study history are condemned to repeat it.
Very true.
I might use that. By the way, when we had that giant storm in October, that Category 5 incredible storm, and there was a lot of flooding near Safeway, I had been looking back at pictures from the 60s, and there was flooding in front of 7-Eleven in the Safeway area. So something repeated itself. I don't know why exactly, but
Yeah.
it was a big problem many years ago. Okay, Tom, thank you. Nadine, anything you want to add today?
I just wanted to say it was great to see some of you last night at the Boards and Commissions annual celebration. It was really nice to see people in person. Miss the rest of you, but excited to start doing these in person in 2022. And if you want your party favors, you can come by and pick them up.
Lindsay Laura has your mug and a thank you note. It was strange though. Everybody was wearing their mask. And it's a little different. There were bun cakes, mini bun cakes, and bottles of water. It was a good first step back to normality. So that was good. Okay. Ken, anything you'd like to add today?
Nothing in particular. Going back to the wildfire maps, I mean, we're trying to go the opposite way because of wildfire urban interface. We're trying to prove, that the homeowners, the improvements that we've done in San Rafael are better than historic, what's grown up around these houses. So, I guess we're trying to go the opposite direction. Nothing from me, except that I am in Omaha, Nebraska for business, and no one wears a mask here.
Really? Wow.
You're there
You're
right
going
now?
Yeah, like you go into a Target or a grocery store, no one has a mask on.
So we're in Nebraska and Mexico and California. This is the big spread commission meeting.
This is great.
That's cool.
Incredible. Ken, you did send, Diane sent a summary of the points you gave to Chief White about how to talk to homeowners about insurance. I'm going to put that as an attachment to the minutes if it's okay.
Great. Yeah. It's hard to, it's hard for me to dumb it down. And you guys may come back and say, hey, you got to make it simpler for the average individual. Take a look at it, make any comments that you want. And it's just something for the chief when people call him or email him and say, hey, look, I'm in a jam. My homeowner's insurance was canceled. I want him to have something to give them as some type of a guidance as opposed to, nothing.
Now that's helpful because if you had your insurance canceled, you'd want to know where to turn. So it's a first step in how to, turn to information that could be helpful to have a discussion about that. So thank you very much. I liked it.
Yes, thank you. Absolutely.
Okay. Dave, anything you'd like to add today?
Just two items real quick. Number one is super excited about Station 55 and the renovation that's going to start there, I think, Chief, in January or sometime shortly after the new year.
Crews will be moving out here in the next couple of weeks, or actually next several days. And you still have the AmeriCorps crew, though, that'll be occupying their temporary structure. And once they are finished, our personnel will move into the temporary facility there. And roughly about 12 or so months they're anticipating before they actually complete the renovation. So an exciting time. Things are getting underway.
That's great. It's my neighborhood, so I was walking by and I talked to Conan several weeks ago, and the crew there is super excited. So that'll be great.
Yeah.
And then the second item, I'm sorry.
Who was that?
Oh, I thought you had said something.
No, I said, yeah, that's an old station. I go in there and it reminds me of where I lived in the 1950s. So
yeah.
I don't know what year it's old.
It's our voting precinct when you can actually do live voting, and I haven't been in there in a couple of years, but yeah, it's quite old. The second item was just, 'tis the season for fire safety. And so if we can utilize our social media channels and Nextdoor and others, I know there were several things that I'd provided to David and Quinn, and hopefully
So-
we can get those out around.
One of the things I want you to be aware of is there's been a shift in personnel, and we have a new individual, Thomas Wong. He's not new, but he's new to our department, and Thomas is a tremendous asset. He's already making substantial progress and giving us valuable assistance. He's going to assume all the duties and many more that David Catalanoto did not have, and he's going to be, I think you'll find, a very helpful resource as we start looking at populating the calendar the way you had envisioned and we had discussed months back, in the way of putting fire safety messages out on a fairly regular basis and or monthly basis. So he's just getting acclimated right now and transitioning David's roles over to him. So I'd say give it just a few more weeks at the most, and you should probably start hearing from Thomas and or getting an opportunity to bounce ideas off of one another and just watch how things develop quickly from there.
What's
Excellent.
his title, Chief?
He's the senior management analyst, and his name is Thomas Wong.
Okay.
Excellent. Look forward to meeting him.
Absolutely.
Is David still working? He's still with the department.
Actually, David is in a competitive process somewhere else. I can't really go into a lot of detail just yet, but I've got a sense that he's probably going to be a short timer. That's what I get a sense.
Okay.
Yes.
Stan, anything you'd like to add today?
First a
You've
comment.
already done your job with the minutes. Is there anything else?
I wasn't trying to raise the bar. I was just having some fun. The last year and a half of our getting together monthly on Zoom was obviously driven by COVID, and we're looking forward to the point where we will then obviously be back around a table in the same room at the same time. That said, it has occurred to me that it would be handy even then to keep the meeting up live on Zoom for those in the public who would want to join and those in the commission who might be traveling. Two examples today. So whatever office coordinates that, and that may be Laura, I just throw it out on the table for consideration that finally, when we get back together, we should probably have an open mic and and a camera up and running. And by the way, having the fact that it's recorded and accessible after for those who do the minutes from time to time makes getting a lot of the details rather handy. The other issue is in today's IJ, Dick Spotswood had a column dealing with water. There are political overtones to what he's saying. Okay, fine, leave it up to your judgment if you read it. But it raised an issue in my mind. I grew up in San Francisco, where the city itself, starting back in the 1800s, established a series of cisterns, large underground tanks of water that range anywhere from 10,000 to over 200,000 gallons. They're scattered all over the city, and they're static. They're kept full, but if there's a major earthquake and the pipes break and the hydrants aren't working, they have the option of dropping snorkels into the cisterns and gaining water that way. That said, does Marin, AKA San Rafael, have an alternate water plan for fighting fires? Chief White?
I have to admit, the only plan that we currently have involves the use of drafting, and that would be from a static body of water. The problem that we have with that method is if, say, for instance, we needed to get water from the canal all the way back to the Public Safety Center or City Hall, That's a pretty substantial stretch that we'd have to do a lot of relay pumping. And you lose pressure as you continue to put more units in place, moving all the way to that point. One of the things we had in my previous community was a portable water supply system, PWSS. And the PWSS was actually designed by someone in San Francisco who's no longer in San Francisco. But those systems are effective at serving as an above ground hydrant system, if you will. You have to have a source of water that's going to be a steady and ongoing source, much as the bay would be. And then you can use this portable water supply system to move water with the units pumping through those water supply units, if you will, and the hose that are assigned to those units. The challenge we have currently is, as I stated, there's very few, if any, other agencies that are developing something like that. And that's unfortunate because the utility of something like that is invaluable. The downside is maintaining those units that are very seldom used. At times you start watching the corrosion of parts, the erosion of the fabric on the hose, as an example, the delineation or delimitation rather. So it just becomes something that can be cost prohibitive for agencies that are already, cash strapped. If you have a grant or you have some other source of funding that can actually secure units, that would actually be a prime ask of the Fire Foundation if they were interested in trying to supply the portable water supply systems with the fireboat San Rafael pumping directly into those units and pushing water wherever it's needed. I've seen them operate. We did drills when I was a special operations battalion chief where we used what was called the Seawolf in Oakland to pump into our portable water supply systems, used engines spaced periodically apart, and push water in simulated exercises, great distances, to make sure they were actually going to do what we needed them to do. If, for instance, there was a fire downtown Oakland in a high rise and we needed to go to Jack London Square, connect this portable water supply system because the below ground system was compromised. So they can work. It's just, I haven't seen anything being produced anywhere. And then maybe there's something in Europe as an example, but I haven't seen anything being produced in this country. And I think that's predominantly because the demand for them is probably specialized demand, primarily in areas where there may be a problem with an earthquake as an example, or in a very remote area. In most cases, it's less expensive to get a water tender or some other device and transport water back and forth as opposed to using this as a supply method, because those PWSSs will only take you so far, whereas a portable water tender will help carry water, miles and miles.
Yeah, I've used those on the prescribed burns up in the Redwood National Forest and what have you, in places where there really wasn't a water supply, and we had the portable tanks set up and had water tankers supplying them. Limited capacity is one drawback.
Do we have a map system of the location of all the swimming pools in San Rafael? I mean, I've got 22,000 gallons in the backyard.
Yeah. I would have to guesstimate that our fire prevention personnel who are responsible for our building and planning, someone has to have some access to that information, whether it's been mapped out or whether it's been put on a spreadsheet. I really couldn't say with certainty.
All right.
But to that point, it's a question I'm going to pose now.
Yeah. Okay.
Marin Academy is working on their Olympic-sized swimming pool on Fifth Avenue.
Right.
And
A little bit bigger than mine.
it's pretty big. During the Loma Prieta earthquake, I remember in San Francisco in '89, when they had that fire in the marina, the fireboat was very helpful in getting water from the bay to those burning houses, because I think there was a rupture of the water lines around the house. So it's during an earthquake that you're going to be most appreciative to having those portable supplies. So I think it's a great idea, Stan. Certainly warrants being looked into.
Okay.
Expensive and how realistic it is depends on the details, as the chief was saying, about maintenance, upkeep, location of the water. But swimming pools, fireboat, there's water out there. We could get, at least on the on the shoreline. So it's a great idea. Thank you. Anything else today?
Nothing for me.
Okay, before we get to the chief, I'll just tell you that I gave this to Tom and Nadine. This is from SPANFO, which is Society for the Preservation and Appreciation of Antique Motor Fire Apparatus. And the November issue was all about San Rafael. I don't know where they got all the pictures, different places, but all the different fire trucks over the years in San Rafael. So I put that, Larry, in your envelope, and Dave and Stan, you'll get that along with your challenge coin. And the second article I put in there was from the New Yorker just a few weeks ago about the wildland urban interface and wildland firefighting. It's sort of a personal interest story, but it's good reading, and it talks about the challenges of fighting these giant fires, the Dixie Fire and others. So that's in your reading material. Okay, Chief, we got a written report, which is very extensive. What would you like to talk to us about today?
Actually, before I get started, can I make a special request? I'm kind of a history buff at times when it comes to the fire service. Can you share
Yes.
those same documents that you're giving to commissioners regarding the fire apparatus as well?
Yes, I've got your copies here, and I'll drop them off at the firehouse.
Thank you so much. Or if it's easier, maybe Saturday, whatever
Yeah, I'll
works
do it
easier.
Saturday.
Okay,
Be happy to. That's perfect.
thank you, thank you. Well, the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, I'm going to start with that information. The environmental compliance personnel are working with the various agencies within the county on their submissions for projects to ensure that they're actually meeting the CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act criteria. Given that, there's a meeting coming up this next week with Director Brown. He's going to meet with the advisory technical committee as well as the operations committees to kind of just go over some of the work that's being planned and discussed as we start to launch and vet what we're going to be doing for the 2022 work plan. He's also requested that any agency that has completed work and that has links that can show the work that's being done in the community, that information be shared back with him so they can populate it on the MWPA website and kind of provide some county-wide perspective and information for everyone to kind of take a look at. And it serves also as a redundancy in case someone hasn't looked at the local website and they're happen to look at the MWPA's. They have another source to glean the same information from. There was also a recent prescribed fire discussion, and the panel, I guess, concluded. And from what I understand, it was a well-attended session, and there was a lot of good conversation surrounding indigenous burning practices and those things that have for so long been frowned upon, but also some of the challenges that occur with prescribed burning, like when fires get out of control, which is obviously unintended. So some of the subject matter experts had those conversations, and I believe information from that's going to be posted on the MWPA website sometime in the next few weeks. So be looking for that. I'm in particular interested in that information because I want to kind of get an understanding about that area, given the turn of the last century is about the time I think that officials made the determination that that was an antiquated practice and they kind of steered away from it. Well, what we didn't do is have a nice fuel mitigation plan to come behind that. And so as a result, I think it was Commissioner Burford that indicated, decades and decades of no goats and no grazing and no other activities have now created a massive fuel load. And so prescribed burning is actually one of the more effective ways to start addressing that if it can be done safely. I include a picture of some recent work that was completed along Idleberry Fire Road. This is in Marinwood, but I wanted to share that this is an area where there's been goat grazing, but there's also been other project work to help address the ladder fuels, the ground fuels, the fuels that are actually, between 0 and maybe 6 or 10 feet high. And so it was a local funded MWPA project, and it's making a lot of headway, and there's been a lot of compliments for the work that's been done in this and other areas. The compliments stem from the idea that it looks like it was just thoughtfully done. It wasn't something that was just haphazardly done or somehow or another aggressively done with just taking chainsaws to things and laying waste to them. So it just speaks to the technical expertise, the care and consideration, and the thoughtfulness that goes into the work that's being done by some of our vendors. So just wanted to share that as a snapshot. Going to move into some of our guidelines and conversation regarding COVID. At the time I wrote the newsletter, we had an infection of a vaccinated person take place with members at Station 58, Marinwood. But that was followed maybe about a week and a half later by one of our own members who was unvaccinated, opted not to be vaccinated. That person tested positive and created, as you might imagine, a bit of a concern because this occurred over the Thanksgiving weekend. There were visitors to the station, as well as transports that were provided by this individual who was providing evaluation, care, treatment, and transport. And so that brought on a slew of questions and concerns that I had to, address with staff. And then we moved it forward to city leadership, human resources, and even legal counsel as recently as this past Monday to get some guidance, if you will, that doesn't currently exist in the Center for Disease Control documents or in our Marin Human and Health Services documents or in the state public health department guidance as well. So there's nuances here. And I'll give you an example of one of the questions I posed. And there were many, but I'm just going to settle on one right now. We have unvaccinated members, even in the county, and this is in the report later, even within the county, about 64,000 people have received their booster out of roughly 235,000. At what point does the vaccine become considered ineffective and efficacy is no longer something that can really identify someone as being vaccinated despite having taken 1 or 2 doses? And so I'm hearing there's a rapid erosion of efficacy depending on which of the vaccines were completed. For instance, Johnson & Johnson or the Janssen vaccine kind of erodes pretty quickly, a single dose. Maybe not quite as quickly for Moderna and Pfizer, but still noticeably different within 6 months' time. And so given that, we're pressing hard for members to be vaccinated, but what are we doing about members being proactive and being boosted as well so that their immunity and their potential for any breakthrough infections doesn't lead to illness or major consequences as opposed to just the signs and symptoms that may be milder, as an example that we hear about with the Omicron recent variant. So there's going to be more information to follow. I think that's something also being considered at the county level. But for us that are operating right now at the local level, we're having to make some tough decisions about how we're approaching either quarantining individuals, compensating them for taking leave on their own and going into isolation because they don't want to go home and pose a risk to their family members, as an example. And there's just a whole slew of other things that come with this. So I put that out there to help you understand these conversations are still happening right now, and they probably will be for the next easily few months until either a couple of things happen. Mandated vaccines become what's required in public safety, or there's a determination that vaccination is going to be an ongoing process and folks are going to have to agree to that. And I'm not sure how well that's going to play out. I think at some point people might become vaccine weary. So we'll see how this goes, but I just wanted you to understand some of the challenges that are occurring. And so although we've had a great run as one of the best communities within the state and within the country, I'm hearing information that's saying our number of infections are increasing drastically, so much so that we may be actually starting to lead other areas within the state as far as infection rates, rather. So that's a concern. Are we talking breakthrough infections, or are we talking about just a population of, say, 18 or so thousand people who are not vaccinated? And is that running through them, or is it doing breakthrough and running through those that are unvaccinated? So I'm going to be looking for more information over the next couple of weeks, and hopefully my next report will be able to speak to some of those things in January.
Yeah, I hope that you'll be able to use the medical director, Jordan Sachs, Dr. Sachs, to help guide some of these discussions. It's unfortunately become very political, which to me is insane.
Yes.
Vaccines to me are not political. It's a health issue. I think they're a miracle. I'm vaxxed to the max, and I will continue to be over the next 2 years until COVID becomes background noise. But I know that it's divided a lot of families. And we've got a personal thing going on with my wife's sister's kids who refused to get vaccinated in Southern California. And they were sending us all these articles saying it's not that bad and you don't have to get vaccinated. And basically she was turning her problem into our problem, which this is what this firefighter has done. This firefighter
Yes.
wasn't vaccinated who got, I don't know if they got sick or not, but it's beside the point to some extent, is they turned their problem into our problem. And so it's very unfortunate, I think. And I'm a proponent of mandates and such, but I know that it's not a fully done deal yet. So we'll have to work through it. But if you need advice or want to talk about it, I think the Fire Commission is a great place to do it. And I know it's not clear exactly how to do things, but I think that politicizing vaccines just makes no sense to me. And it's unfortunate, but that's what's happened. So that's a reality and we'll deal with it, but it's very unfortunate.
I agree.
If it comes to passing on any of the conversations with the commissioners and what have you, my position is I'm disappointed that members of the department, line members of the department involved in public safety and healthcare, pre-hospitalization healthcare, would not get vaccinated. I just, that's very disappointing.
I agree with both of you. And for what it's worth, I created 2 separate memos on this subject. One was in August before I went off for my eye surgery. The second was when I came back. And in October, I spoke again to the operational impact, to the potential other ramifications that come behind this, the significant cost, as an example, what we have spent to date and what we could potentially spend moving forward, given the impact on, say, a battalion chief's time, who's tracking, doing close contact monitoring, sometimes tracing, following up with HR, sending emails, entering data into a spreadsheet, and just having oversight over something that really was not in the job description, but certainly takes that battalion chief away from doing some of the other essential things that need to happen on a day-to-day basis in the fire service. And so this breakthrough this unvaccinated member creating or testing positive created, out of a 48-hour set for this individual, they spent probably most of their waking time, with the exception of a hazmat incident, trying to chase down information, trying to contact individuals, trying to research who the person had been working with, whether or not those individuals had secured a test, what the test results were. You can just see how this continues to go on. And so I put my memo out there for what it's worth. I think, there's a desire to some degree to watch other agencies land where they're going to land on this. And then maybe there's going to be a decision point after that. I don't know that there's the appetite or desire to go against the SRFA on the county level or even on the local level. But my information, my first memo, was shared with the union president intentionally because I wanted him to understand where I stood and where this was going from my perspective. He shared that with the executive board and the general members. And obviously some of those individuals didn't take too kindly to what I had to share, but it's my responsibility to not only look out for the members, their families, but also the public we serve. And so that was what drove my decision and the information I shared and the basis for why I felt and why I believe still that vaccination should occur for public safety personnel. And apparently the medical health industry feels kind of similar. As you look at, my report, it speaks to Kaiser. Kaiser has, 80 some thousand employees just in Northern California alone. And given there are about 2,000 employees or so who have opted not to be vaccinated and have possibly sought either some form of exemption or accommodation, if they were told no before November 7th, they had until today.
Yeah,
Today was going to be the day they received their walking papers. For those who were told after November 7th, they're going to have some time between now and January 10th to come into compliance with the mandate. And if they fail or opt not to, then chances are they're going to receive their termination papers as well, from what I understand. And so I think there's been the patience, but there's also been negotiation behind the scenes. There's been a lot of, let's wait and see what's happening with case law. If any emerges on this, there's a whole lot at play right now. And to Dr. Mizrock's point, some of it may be political, but I think some of the larger agencies are really looking at the liability aspect of this, and they don't want to assume it. And And hopefully that won't be a situation we face here in San Rafael for any reason, but situations are occurring already, and it has that potential. We had to notify individuals in the public, as an example, that they may have been exposed. And so that was the very thing I was concerned about. That singular thing right there was the very thing I was concerned about, because there may be unvaccinated members in the public that we expose. I'm not as concerned about the breakthrough infections, because those tend to be mild, but those who are unvaccinated will be the ones that may take the severe brunt of this and could perish from it. And so, my personal feeling is just that. I know I can't compel others to do something that they don't believe or wholeheartedly support, but they also get a chance to make a decision. And that's what's going to be left to see what occurs. Is this something we try to manage moving forward, and it's just something we absorb as part of our new reality, or is that going to change, how we do business? And I'm not really sure. It's kind of still an evolving thing, but I'll report on it as I get more information. And so you'll stay abreast of what I have and what I know every month.
Firefighters who live and work in close quarters and all have advanced medical education should know better. And I think probably, Steve, you may be the only one to know this, but probably a dozen years ago, I got some feedback from more than one crew concerned about the fact that the stations didn't all have dishwashers. And so the risk of contaminating crew members via the kitchen at mealtime. And in response to that, I went out and bought 3 dishwashers with sanitizing cycles and helped install one of them. So I know that our folks have concern about their team members, about their crew, and what have you. And vaccination should be a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be case law that ultimately determines what happens. I was told just recently from someone else, and I haven't confirmed this yet. I'll be speaking with Chief Freeman probably in the next couple of weeks. In fact, I'm going to see him in a couple of weeks. But I was told in my former organization, there are 40 individuals, or roughly approximately 40 individuals, who have refused to be vaccinated. And I hear that their jobs may be on the line. And that's creating a morale issue in the organization. And I don't know if the morale issue is based on them losing their peers and friends who are going to get termination notices, or if it's based on the amount of overtime that individuals are going to now be required to work, because 40 vacancies spread across 3 shifts in that agency is roughly 13 or 14 vacancies throughout the ranks. And you can just imagine that's going to keep people working around the clock for some time to come if that actually comes to fruition. And so, I'm hearing that in many instances, once people are pressed all the way to the final, that, hey, this is it, it's time for you to go, then at some point, maybe 90% of those individuals go ahead and get vaccinated, because they see that there's really no more room to stall. But there's still a few individuals who are still, dead set against this, and are going to go get legal representation and or fight for their rights and or reinstatement. So that being said, the other fallout from that is that morale issue. And that's what you don't want to see, is diminishing morale behind something like this. There's other reasons morale can plummet and tank, but you don't want this to be the reason. But it could very well be.
Yeah. Well, there's been a lot of examples in the news. Andrew Wiggins on the basketball team, the Warriors, didn't want to get vaccinated and finally did, because he was going to lose salary. Kyrie Irving back with the Nets wouldn't do it. It would creep me out if I was a firefighter to have to live in a firehouse with people who weren't vaccinated, because really it's like on a cruise ship or a nursing home, or it's a family living in close quarters, working together constantly for 48 hours. It's really creepy.
And the other side of that is, now let's say 2 out of the 3 members are vaccinated and one isn't. Everyone's required to mask up now. So even though that, I've taken the vaccine, and so has maybe the company officer, but the engineers decided not to, well, guess what? we all have to mask up. And so that creates a little dissension probably amongst members at some point as well. So, but we'll see. I'll like I said, I'll update as we move forward.
Thanks
wanted
for
to speak
sharing the
about-
problem with us. I'm not going
sorry?
to put it extensively in the minutes. I'll refer to it obliquely as an issue that has to be resolved, but it's challenging within the fire service as it is in society in general,
Right.
all walks of life and all professions. So,
Yes.
but it's very unfortunate. It's disappointing and it's frustrating. So
Interesting
Yeah.
to see what happens when the medication comes as a pill.
when you can.
Yeah,
just a
no,
bit-
seriously. I mean, one of the things that's been discussed is
Yeah.
the whole vaccination issue. 99% of the publicity, both for and against, is showing somebody getting a shot. And that apparently, talk to a psychologist, turns people off. But taking a pill doesn't.
Yeah.
So,
Fear of the needle, huh?
yeah, no, as weird as it sounds.
Well, you can work yourself into an
I said,
anxiety.
over here,
depending
I'll
on-
look out the window, you know how, but
Yeah. Yeah.
There's been several people that are high profile that have died from COVID. One, Marcus Lamb has a podcast and a radio show,
yeah, right.
and he's been a vaccine denier.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's sort of like a trio
I can get 'em.
of misinformation. COVID's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Two, if you get it, it's very mild. Number three, if you get it, you can take ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine. And four, I'm not taking a vaccine. And he just died.
Mhm.
I'm reminded of the old proverb that sometimes the only way to prove someone wrong is to let them have their way. And I think that happened to Marcus Lamb, but how many examples of that do you need before people start to understand this is really serious? Not for everybody, but getting vaccinated is not that big a deal.
No.
But Stan, one of my sister-in-laws hates needles. She faints, she goes crazy, but she got the vaccine. She's vaccinated.
I know, I hear you.
Okay, Chief, sorry for the interruption, but it's an interesting discussion.
No worries, no worries. On Tuesday, November 30th, last week, we had Kate Anderson, our subject matter expert and registered professional forester. She was able to get CAL FIRE reps and other officials to come out and do a demonstration on an air curtain burner. This is something that I was familiar with just before I left Oakland, but I hadn't seen one demoed. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to see this one demoed, but I did get video. And I presented a couple of snapshots for you guys to get a look at the portable model. This is a very, very, I think, valuable piece of equipment that reduces the footprint of fuels down to ash. And it's phenomenal because it only emits a small amount of smoke. Given this, I certainly see more value in this piece of equipment than I do a chipper. And I say that primarily because chippers have to redistribute a lot of their chippings. So the fuel problem is just changed into a different form. I'd rather the fuel problem be changed into the form of ash, which is not going to ignite if there's going to be a modification of the fuel form. But that being said, there's also some Bay Area Air Quality Management District permits required. There's other, sequences and processes you have to go through. You have to have an engine on standby. You have to have people that know how to operate and know how to load so that the burn and the smoke kind of blows or ebbs and flows a certain way. And so there's some training and oversight required, but it's still a very, very useful piece of equipment. And so I'm hoping that one of these fiscal years, hopefully maybe even as soon as this year, the San Rafael Fire Department can actually engage on one of these and use it to help draw down some of our fuel load. That being said, I can certainly see other agencies jumping on board and saying, can we borrow your unit? Because we see the value of it instead of everyone wanting to go all in. And I say that because we already had this demonstrated to the Marin County Fire Chiefs Association earlier this year. And there was a question about whether or not we should hold off on it. They have a large skid mounted unit versus the portable unit. The skid mounted unit is obviously going to sit in place. It's not going to be something that moves a whole lot. You'll have to bring the fuel to it. But having one or two portable units can do almost the same work as the large skid mounted unit and affords you a lot of versatility. And so this is something I'm hoping to see gain some momentum and some use over time. And so I wanted you guys to be aware of that. because that's one of the tools in our arsenal, hopefully somewhere down the road here. That being said, the generosity and Dr. Mizrock, I think you spoke to this before. I want to certainly say thank you again to the Fire Commission and Foundation for taking the opportunity to support the AmeriCorps personnel who yet again are unable to spend time with their families during Thanksgiving because they had come to San Rafael and Marinwood to perform volunteer work. And so the meals provided from Andy's, that's huge. It's certainly appreciated. And it's a testament to, not only the thoughtfulness, but just the level of appreciation you guys obviously have for the AmeriCorps crews. That crew left. Another crew of 10 has now shown up, and they're going to continue to do the great work that they have always been known to do. And so I'm really appreciative to Quinn and the others who are building really effective relationships with AmeriCorps so that AmeriCorps is compelled to come back year after year. And I'm sure your generosity every year helps them feel like they're valued and appreciated and will want to return year after year. So again, thanks for playing a large part of that.
Well, happy to do that. And it seems like they all want to come on Thanksgiving for some reason. What was interesting of the 5 people at that thing, along with Lexi, the crew leader, everybody was from a different city.
Yes.
I mean, I did quite appreciate how widespread everybody is in AmeriCorps coming from outside the community. It's great for them to see Marin County too, which is really neat.
So it's an opportunity for folks across the country. Not this past crew, but the crew before. I went and I sat in and I had an opportunity to just listen to each one of them, get some of their background. And it was amazing to hear, folks coming in from as far as Ohio and Wisconsin and other places that were really just, coming to volunteer to help out in a strange land, if you will. And had no reservations about doing it, but, clearly found value in doing it. And so, I certainly express my appreciation to them because they could be doing something else with their time somewhere else. And it was just really a great thing to see and meet those youth.
Very nice.
And then last but not least, I have a picture of some of the training our new recruits actually received a few weeks ago. They were trying to get acclimated to how to effectively deploy a wildland shelter. In the event there's a burnover, you have a very small window of time in most instances to clear out the ground below you and know how to properly get yourself situated inside that shelter and then lay down with arms and legs and everything spread out and ensuring somehow or another you're putting that tent in the best possible position for you to be able to survive. And ironically, I thought it's always strange that they want your head to face the fire that's oncoming, but it's what it is. So I just thought I'd share a snapshot of that. Those recruits are actually graduating this Saturday, and they'll be at the San Rafael Community Center at B Street at 10 a.m. And there's going to be a special acknowledgement of Battalion Chief, very brief, but an acknowledgement of Battalion Chief Matt Windrum, who's moving on to Sonoma County Fire Department as a division EMS section chief for their agency that's growing and growing. And also acknowledgement of Captain Bob DeLambert for the activities and things he's done to support the foundation, the community, and the department. So hopefully the weather's going to be nice. I haven't checked it out to see what it's going to be, but maybe cool out. So I'd certainly suggest sweaters and or light jackets.
Yeah, it's not going to rain until Sunday. It's my understanding. Who knows?
Okay.
Good. And I think people know that Chris Gray is moving to Santa Fe. So
Oh, really?
yeah, we wish Chris well is moving to Santa Fe and a lot of change.
Yes.
Okay, anything from anyone else? Anything you'd like to share with the Fire Commission today?
That's it.
Okay, well, somehow we got through another year of COVID, although with the vaccine this year, better. And Stan, you've pointed out an advantage of Zoom that I didn't really think much about is that, I mean, Mr. Johnson and Larry wouldn't be able to join us if it hadn't been for Zoom. So
Yeah.
it's not all bad.
Not
It's a
all
good
bad.
thing, and being able to call in like this is much better than not being there at all. There's no saying in medicine, halitosis is better than no breath at all. So,
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Thank you all.
everybody.
Happy holidays.
All right.
See you Saturday.
That's
All
all.
right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.